1. I had recently had a relationship end, so I was in rebound mode when a friend introduced me to a guy I found attractive. We ended up hanging out more on our own, hitting it off pretty well, and began seeing each other exclusively, although casually. I wanted to like him. He seemed nice and everything, but my gut instinct told me that there was something off about him. It was several months before I figured out what it was. I went to stay the night with him one evening, and we decided to get drunk. It got pretty hazy after a point, but I vaguely remembered getting really nervous at a point, making up an excuse to go home, walking myself back, and going to bed feeling rather troubled. I racked my brain for hours trying to remember what had gone wrong, as he texted me like everything was normal. And then I finally remembered. We had been discussing some touchy subjects regarding our pasts, when he decided to tell me a story about an ex of his. He described in explicit detail how he had violently raped her and gotten away with it, due to her failure to press charges, without a hint of remorse in his face or his voice. I started ignoring texts and calls after that. There was about a week where I was getting 20 missed calls and texts a day. Although none of it was threatening or creepy, the frequency was way too much. I started placating him with the occasional text claiming I was busy, sick, tired, or otherwise too occupied to talk or hang out. And he actually stopped trying to contact me for several months. During that time frame, I became seriously romantically involved with someone else, and started a customer service-related job in a centralized, fairly high-crime area of the city. I was dreading the day he would come in to buy something at my place of work. And after about a month of working there, he did. Later that evening, he texted me wanting to get together, so I told him I have a boyfriend, and I heard nothing out of him for quite some time. I thought he was finally out of my life. But there was one day he came back to the place I work to tell me he factory reset his phone and lost my number. So he wanted me to find him on Facebook. I never did. He began coming to my workplace significantly more often, and I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he never seemed to come in when there were other people in the store. And if a lot of people started coming in after him, he would leave and come back later. There was one day that he stopped there for over half an hour, repeatedly telling me how he misses me and whatnot. I had gotten to the point where I didn't react much to anything he said, and it didn't seem to faze him. There was one day. He had come in right as a large rush was starting, so as usual, he left. After all those customers cleared out, my boyfriend called me, so I decided to talk to him until the next customer came in. I was pacing around while we talked, and I kept noticing movement outside the window from the corner of my eye. But when I would take notice and look dead on, nothing would be out of place. I positioned myself so that I could see the window in a mirror, and I watched him walk by 6 times, look in the window to see if I was occupied, and quickly leave before he figured I'd see him. Sure enough, when I got off the phone, he came back in, pretending to have forgotten to buy something he needed the first time around. I ended up getting engaged to the man I was with, still am, and there are a lot of people in his past and my past who aren't very happy about that. People have been doing all kinds of shit to try and drive a wedge between us, but we already know all of each other's dirty laundry, and we're both smart enough to tell fact from fiction when it comes to rumors. So we're good. Well, this creep decided to try to take it to the next level and circulate explicit photos of me from when we were seeing each other to a number of people that my fiancé knows. Of course, it didn't hurt my current relationship, but we're both pretty pissed at the one who did it. Even after that, he still pulls the stalking and talking shit at my workplace, and there's not really anything I can do about it. I'm really glad I have such a great future husband, because I'd hate to have to start dating all over again and risk getting myself mixed up with another head case like this one. Update. I'm really late getting around to this, as I've been very busy with my new job, where I don't have to deal with this creep ever again. I've seen him around a few times since changing jobs, but he hasn't seemed to see me or tried speaking to me. I'm glad to say that this situation has finally settled down. 2. So for a bit of background, I'm a female and was 15 years old at the time. I was going through a bit of a rough patch in my life since my mom divorced my abusive father and had remarried. I'm the second youngest of 7 children, so most of my older siblings had already moved out. I was still adjusting to a life with now 4 new step-siblings, and a fatherly figure completely different from my biological father. He was actually an extremely nice person, and was very encouraging. I couldn't be happier that my mom found such a great guy. His house was in a nice neighborhood and was fairly big and expensive, something I wasn't used to considering the fact that my dad was going through job after job, trying to support our large family in tiny townhouses, while blowing most of our money on useless junk and cigarettes. At the time, I was throwing myself at any guy who was interested in me. I guess I was trying to find some sort of validation or love that I didn't receive from my dad. I had recently gotten accepted to volunteer at an aquarium about 30 miles away from my home. I was ecstatic because marine biology was a huge passion of mine, and still is. I met an attractive guy there who seemed interested in me. He did little things such as snatching papers from my hands or poking me with a stupid grin on his face. Dumb teenage flirting. I gave in and we started talking. Long story short, he was an ass and got bored with me, leaving me feeling even more empty than before. I was devastated. I started texting one of my girlfriends about it, and she told me to call her. Now, I usually like to keep to myself about things like this and don't like it when my family tries to intervene. So I simply bolted out of the house at 11 p.m. and told my mom I was taking the dog out, before I put her in her kennel for the night. I quickly strapped my Jack Russell's vest and leash on and headed out. I dialed my friend's phone number as soon as I was out the door, and she answered asking if I was okay and whatnot. I broke down crying, literally bawling my eyes out. I shouldn't have been so upset over this jerk of a guy, but rejection is difficult. Anyway, because I wanted to get out of the house before my mom could see that I was crying, I ran out in sweatpants, no shoes, and a jacket in the early spring. Needless to say, I was freezing my ass off. I walked around the neighborhood with my dog, quietly keeping pace with me as I ranted about my recent heartbreak. I started to calm down a bit, but wasn't quite ready to go inside yet because of my puffy red eyes. So I sat next to a street lamp and began petting my dog and chatting with my friend. A couple minutes later, I heard a loud, annoying screech as a beaten-up green car pulled up literally 3 feet in front of me, and 3 men got out. They looked like they were in their early 20s and wore typical white boy clothing, such as khakis, baseball hats, and button-ups. This immediately set off red flags. First of all, why pull up so close to me? There were no houses where I was sitting. The only thing behind me was a forest and a ditch encircled in a fence. Second of all, 3 grown, tall men, or should I say boys because of the lack of maturity, approach a 115-pound girl. I guess they didn't see that I was on the phone because they got out of the car and walked towards me. So I immediately start walking away and quietly tell my friend, I think I'm being followed. If you hear anything strange, then call 911. Of course, she freaks out and starts asking what's going on. But I don't want them to hear me and know that I'm talking to someone, so I stay silent. As I'm walking away, some stupid part of me was trying to rationalize the situation. I was thinking to myself, maybe they have a good reason for doing this. Maybe if I just act casual, they'll leave. But something in me clicked, and fight or flight mode kicked in. I immediately started running. My dog, thank God, started running beside me. I ran behind the ditch, which was obviously a mistake. They were shouting things like, "Get the bitch," and "We're gonna corner you." I grabbed my dog and darted into the nearby forest. I didn't want these guys knowing where I lived, so the next best thing to me at the time was to run into the woods and hide. Dumb decision, I know. I hid in a dark area just over an incline, arms wrapped around my dog, and tried to be as still as possible. I had a decent view of them walking into the woods from the faint light of the street lamp I had previously been sitting next to. They looked around for a bit and turned on their cell phone lights. But I guess they gave up because I heard some mumbled cussing and their fading footsteps as they walked away. I continued to hold my breath, but was quickly brought back to reality by the buzzing of my phone. I had several text messages from the friend I had been talking to. I must have hung up on her in my running, and she was worried. I replied that I was okay, but before I could text anything else, I was briefly distracted by their shit pile of a car that started up and drove away. As soon as it was silent again, I ran straight for my house. I should have called the police sooner, but I just wanted to be safe inside my home, with the doors locked. I burst through the front door and quickly slammed it shut, deadbolted it, and fell onto the floor crying. One of my younger stepbrothers was actually in the living room at the time and ran to me to see what the problem was. I didn't answer any of his questions because I couldn't stop crying, so he just sat next to me and rubbed my back. The commotion of my sobbing and the barking of my poor dog that was still attached to the leash led to my mother, stepfather, and 3 of my siblings coming downstairs. My mom tightly hugged me, and I calmed down a bit and explained what happened. Luckily, a police officer lives next door to us, and my stepdad and biological brother quickly left the house and searched the neighborhood. They never found anything or any evidence, but we made a report. My brother gave me one of his pocket knives after they got back, which I still have and carry with me to this day. Thankfully, nothing happened. What scares me, though, is what could have happened. I could have been raped and killed, who knows? I left only with scraped feet, and the reality that this shit really does happen. My mom even told me that night about how she was almost kidnapped at my age. Guys, this is a real issue today, and is more common than you think. We need to be prepared and ready to make quick decisions in these situations. So, punk-ass guys who ride around in a shitty green 5-passenger car, let's never meet again. 3. I'm a 32-year-old female. I made friends with Angie from my prior job. We started hanging out, just watching movies at my place, chatting, catching up, and watching YouTube. We had a pattern of hanging out once every 2 to 3 weeks. Nothing exciting. Angie had married a man, we'll call him Jack. She knew for only 3 months. She's been married to him now for about 8 months. He's mentally and physically abusive. Angie isn't allowed any privacy of any shape or form. All of her online accounts are accessed by Jack, social media, email. There is no way to reach out to Angie besides her phone number. But I don't dare call her number ever again. The cops have been called on them by neighbors due to the loud arguments and screaming. Jack was isolating her from the start, and immediately hated me from the beginning. I've thankfully never met the psycho in person, but I have had communication from him via text. About 2 months ago, Jack sent me a text from Angie's phone posing as her. I was questioned about what we were doing the next day, etc. Suddenly I am asked, "Tell me why my husband thinks you and me are sleeping together." I went off saying that he's beyond paranoid. Then I quit responding, smelling something fishy. Next day, Angie woke up to find all the things he said to me were deleted, and found that my text responses were only there. He had hijacked her phone. She wound up having to delete my phone number. I decided that I can't handle the drama at the time, and let time pass. Angie reached out to me the other evening, having found my phone number written down somewhere. and had lost it because Jack had broken her other phone. I agreed to hang out the following day. We met up. I cashed my work check and we went to a late lunch. Angie and I chatting up, and wound up hanging out with my roommate for a little while. Nothing eventful until a message came through from Jack to Angie. He accused her of picking me over him, and that is breaking his heart. He went on to say some other possessive things. Angie had to leave before he got home from work, allowing me to only walk so far, since she was paranoid he might be nearby. My roommate, Johnny, said that it sounds like Jack might be in a local gang. I fell asleep a little early, missing a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, around 11 p.m. I woke up at 3:30 a.m. to find the following text messages from his number. "Stay the fuck away from my wife. I wouldn't want an accident to happen to you. Stay away from Angie. That's not a threat, that's a promise. You really don't want to see me. Thank you, and have a good evening." Being a little shaken, I went downstairs to show Johnny. Clearly my decision is to put my friendship with Angie on hold until she finally escapes him. Johnny was not happy about the texts and says he wants to pretend to be my boyfriend. We started calling Jack so Johnny could talk to him. Johnny blew up his phone, left a voicemail telling Jack to call his number, and repeated it twice to make sure Johnny got it. Instead, Jack calls me an hour later when I'm about to sleep again. I put Johnny on the phone instead, then suddenly, Jack immediately apologized, said he had the wrong number, then Johnny started at Jack. This whole time, Jack was shouting over Johnny's firm tone, but Johnny stood his ground. Jack said, "You need to keep your white bitch away from my wife." I was pretty happy when Johnny said that he treats me like a human being and with respect. This really ticked Jack off. The argument continued for a couple more minutes, with Johnny establishing that he didn't like the fact that Jack was threatening his household. It escalated to Jack threatening to come over and beat Johnny up, which is laughable since Johnny knows martial arts and studied it for 10 years. The call lasted for 5 minutes. Jack hung up, threatening to come over and that he knows where we live. I talked to Johnny a little bit longer, and then tried to turn in, but there were more text messages sent. I finally installed a text message application to block select contacts. I haven't reached out to Angie, nor do I plan to. Jack didn't wait for 12 hours to pass to contact me again. So far he's called twice within 30 minutes. I keep sending it to voicemail since Johnny insisted that Jack had his number, and shouldn't be calling me to begin with. I'm afraid that he might find me at work tomorrow since Angie is aware of where I work at, and it's possible he'll get it out of her. Thankfully, I didn't work today, and it left time for me to alter my hair enough to where I'm not easily recognizable, since I know he logged into Angie's Facebook account on a constant basis. I would contact the police, but it's possible Jack is in a gang, not in a safe area. I live in an area of North Dallas that has high crime rates, which makes matters worse. We'll update this if anything happens, but hopefully no further contact. Jack, you're right, let's not meet. Update. I haven't heard from Angie, nor do I dare call her phone since Jack clearly has my phone number. It's been a few days since Jack's texted me, but he calls twice a day and I let it go to voicemail. He never leaves a message. Tomorrow I am going to work with the man's photo, printing it off and sticking it at the register. One of my managers made note of my haircut and asked why I did it. I feel a bit better with my hair changed enough to make my friends have to do a double take to make sure it's me. Might go the extra mile and dye it a lighter shade. I explained the situation to him briefly, but not in a ton of detail. My manager told me where the nearest police station is from the store, then said text messages should be enough to file a restraining order against Jack. I spoke to my sister, Kat, who is willing to go to the police station with me. She suggested that if I'm not too paranoid, that I can talk to my store manager to ask if I can use the break room to get some privacy and talk to a police officer back there. The worst part about the last few days is that I didn't even know what Jack looked like, and had to look over my shoulder. I finally tracked him down on Facebook, found out that I am incorrect about a fact. Angie has been married to him since the middle of May only. I would love to be able to help Angie out, but I know how these things go and cannot risk my own life for hers. It hits far too close to home for me since, until I was 11 years old, I grew up in a home where my biological father saw fit to physically and mentally abuse my mother. I feel like I did all that I could in trying to help Angie before. Offered her a list of places able to take her in and keep her safe. Made sure she had a notebook to write down everything that occurs with dates and details. The more I look back at the events, the more it looks like a crime documentary in the making. If there's anything I've learned from the genre is to be careful. Making sure to take along my taser and police-grade pepper spray. We'll update after I've spoken to the police. He did promise to have an accident happen after all. Update. I kept on alert for several weeks, informed the security guy, at night at work, who is extremely protective of me to begin with. Determined not to let this bastard ruin my life, I still rode my bicycle to work. He continued to call my phone each evening, twice for a week, and the calls simply ceased because I chose not to pay my phone bill. When you're on pay-as-you-go with T-Mobile, it means you cannot block texts or phone calls. I figured if I let my phone go out for an entire week, the calls would cease. It turned out I was correct. Life has resumed as usual, but the taser and pepper spray are always at hand. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 183. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I'm going to actually have to send out messages for more stories soon. I haven't really been doing it for the last couple of weeks, obviously, because of the way I've been feeling, but I'm starting to run low. So I'll probably do that tomorrow, get organised, get everything back, get my story reserves built up again. Okay, let's see where we are now. If all goes according to plan, you should get this on Monday. So hopefully we're back to a regular schedule this week. And that means we should have subscriber stories tomorrow, True Scary Stories Wednesday, possibly a glitch video on Thursday. Cross your fingers and toes, we'll see what happens. I've already got paranormal stories for Friday, so we're good there. And just cross your fingers, never mind your toes, for a TIFU on Saturday. Hopefully, if all goes according to plan. Okay, and with that I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.